it works. I love plug and play.
Good morning. So welcome back to day 2 of Devops Days in Columbus, Ohio. Did you have fun yesterday? Awesome. So as you noticed when you're coming in, we had t-shirts up here for you to get them. We will have them back out. Was that after lunch or during lunch? During lunch. So make sure that you're picking up your t-shirt. And like I said, we'll have them back out here. So should we do what we did yesterday? OH! Thank you.
So once again, huge shout out to the sponsors who make this possible. Please make your way around. Go visit them. Several of them also have raffles going on, which we will be doing just prior to lunch. So you will want to go out prior to lunch to go around. I'm not going to tell you which ones, because what's the fun in that? You got to go visit them all.
So yeah, make sure the sponsors are what helps keep your costs low. So make sure you go out and talk to them. That's very important. And of course, yesterday we kind of recognized a few other volunteers that help with organizing the DevOps. Here are all of our mugshots to make sure that we recognize everybody. It takes a lot to get this going, and we start
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow for the next year. Trying to get everything ready. It takes a while to find the venue, to find, understand we get feedback from everybody and we take that into consideration for the following year. So it's important for the retrospective that we'll have later on today that you give us that feedback because we do incorporate that for the following year.
Guidebook. So please, I know some people are here for the first time today. Please make sure you download the Guidebook app and get submitting those open space ideas. We do need a lot more. We actually went through, I believe, almost all of them that we had submitted yesterday. So while I think it was on here that it carries over, that's actually, there's 0 to carry over. So I know I went to a few myself. Great sessions.
So just keep in mind, what we're going to do a little bit different today is make sure that you have your submissions in by 10 a.m., and then we're going to take about a half hour to get them available for you to vote. So if you have ideas, and we definitely need ideas, please have them in by 10.
Quick notes on the Guidebook app. One, we know several people were unable to download it. So go at the front desk. We should have instructions that will allow you to have a web-based version of it instead so that you can also utilize it. I also specifically wanted to point out where the map was on here. While we do have some more maps available now as well, there's this beautiful map already available in that Guidebook app for you, so you can find everything as necessary. Simply open the menu, and it's just straight out under Maps.
What does that map do? Does it tell me how to get home?
Wouldn't that be nice?
So
why would you want to go home?
Because I have a kid there, a sweet little boy, and 3 puppy dogs. Why wouldn't I want to go home?
After the conference.
Okay, so the map is showing you where the rooms are. That's what I was trying to get you to say.
Oh.
So it's showing you where the rooms are. Okay, I get to do this again. So as far as restrooms, like yesterday, they're all over the place. There's unisex restrooms, there's gender restrooms. I know there's men's and women's right here, then there's some unisex over here, and then down where some of the rooms are. So feel free to utilize any of them. That did not sound right, but hey, that's just the way it came out. Lunch will be provided both days. Well, it was provided yesterday, wasn't it? It's going to be provided again today at noon, from noon to 1. Afternoon snack is around 3. Wi-Fi, it's just the Wi-Fi at OSU. It's free. You just need to go through the process, click on the little button saying you're a guest, and then log in.
Live streaming is available. Live to stream is up here. Good luck copying that right quick. You got about 30 seconds. But should be available under Devopsdays Columbus. You can search.
Yes, and we have Kirk in the back who's doing all of our live stream videoing. We appreciate everything he does. Once the day is over in about a week, I think they're out there on YouTube, correct? And so available if you'd want to rewatch anything, they are available through YouTube as well. Yes? So
because the live streams are available and we actually record all of it, we don't usually just straight up put up the presentations, since most of them are useless without the videos, right?
Speaker's discretion, we usually link them on the YouTube slides, our YouTube videos, and on the site.
So normally the speakers will normally put them out there for us. It's up to them. So we do our best to try to get them out there for you. We have videos. Sometimes I think the video doesn't really show I think what we got questions on yesterday out front was some of the print was small, it's hard to see. It'd be nice to be able to see the presentation so they can see it in a bigger view.
The video, the way that Kirk records it, you've got there's what you see on the screen, as well as a video, and it kind of rotates.
Cool.
So the videos will actually provide a lot more clarity sometimes due to how it's captured.
Yep.
That's the general point there.
You want to do this one?
We're
just excited about this. So excited. So Kyle, go ahead.
So unexpected to us, we actually received this really cool report this morning as to how much we're saving the world at this conference. So only 3% went to trash, 72% to compost, and 25% to recycling. So that's just great job for everyone.
So thank you. We appreciate what you did.
Now that said, I do think we can actually improve on that 3%. Please just look at the signs above each of the bins. Make sure you're not throwing away things unnecessarily. I can straight out say, looking at some of the trash cans, a lot of that could be going into the other bins. So just be cautious. Please read the signs. Ask staff if you have any questions.
But again, thank you. We appreciate what you did yesterday. Code of conduct. So just like with any DevOps conference, we have a code of conduct. It's important, treat others like you want to be treated. If you're in the auditorium, don't talk, or if you have to have a conversation, please step outside because others are trying to listen to the speakers. So just kind of common sense type things. If you have any concerns, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Some of us have the turquoise shirt. Some of us, Bill, if you could stand up, have on these navy blue shirts, but they say staff on back. So please reach out to us and we will address the issue.
Thanks.
So thank you. We're going to get ready for day 2. However,
I'm going to pass this off to David.
Yep.
All right, thanks for all of you guys who attended the happy hour last night. We were able to put together 100 toiletry kits, as well as 40 Build-A-Bear.
Drum roll, please.
So you get a lot of fun there putting it together, and I know the kids will love them. All right. So thank you for giving back. You did a great job.
And can I say one thing? So I don't know who these people are, but I walked in the room to try and help out with this, and pretty much these 3 guys did all of this themselves. So big round of applause to these gentlemen.
Thank you. So I also heard that the massage chairs were really popular last night.
Yes. And I hope you guys took advantage of that. There were 10 stations, and I saw a lot of smiles as they were leaving. So thank you. And I hope you enjoyed that and all that stress. Release.
Yes. Now you're ready for day 2.
All right.
Okay, let's go.
I think you're on.
Am I heard? Are people hearing me?
No.
You're hearing
No.
me.
So, reintroducing Dave Stenke, who we got to meet yesterday doing an Ignite, and now is going to be presenting on the lessons that we can implement from the 2019 Accelerate State of DevOps report.
Hello, hello. I have a mic on.
Oh, you have a mic.
It's green. Oh, there we go. So, yeah, cool. Thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone. Let me get all my buttons together here. And let's see, that's that. Good, good, good. We can see that. And I'll do one of these. And I will do one of these. Don't read my speaker notes, it's going to spoil it. And do one of these and do one of these. Okay. Yeah, good. And then I take this and put it over there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, oops, nope, spoiler alert. Hit one of those. And back over here. One of those, one of those. Work. Yes. Okay. It's a great setup. Hi, everyone. So Nathan Harvey was supposed to give this talk, and unfortunately, he was called away on family business. If anyone knows Nathan, I know a lot of you do. You know, he would not miss this lightly. So he sends his regrets. He's not able to attend, but he did prepare this material. And I'm going to present on his behalf. My name is Dave, and I work closely with Nathan at Google Cloud in our developer advocacy program. So today we're going to talk about using DevOps to become an elite performer. I'm going to show you the findings of a bunch of research that shows that there's a big range between how well teams are able to achieve the DevOps goals of throughput and reliability. And those differences have big implications for business results. Now the good news is we can all become elite. No matter your industry, no matter how big your company is, no matter how you got from where you were to where you are, you can get this done. You can be an elite performer. Or, if you prefer to be motivated by a little bit of drama, think of it this way. If you don't up your game for software delivery, you may be at risk of being outperformed, outcompeted by the companies that do. So, DevOps Research and Assessment, or Dora, is a team of analysts who use academic methods to rigorously study how software is made and shipped. They focus on effectiveness at the team level, and they use statistical methods to determine causality, meaning what practices and capabilities are influential in driving successful teams. Something really awesome happened last year that Dora joined Google Cloud, and they've grown and expanded their work as part of our team. Now, Dora and Google Cloud recently released the 6th annual Accelerate State of DevOps report. This just came out about 2-3 weeks ago, hot off the presses. Has anyone here read the report? Okay. That means everyone else is a not yet. And this is really, I encourage you to really give us a look because it's a pretty quick read. It's designed to be read by everyone from technical practitioners to CIO types. And we know how the CIOs like shiny colors and graphs that go up to the right, preferably without any numbers or anchor in reality. So it's pretty easy to read. And even if you only read a couple pages of it, you'll find it interesting. And one of the things that's great about what's in this report, which I'll get into a lot of the details, but one of the things that is valuable is it helps you speak to other people in your organization. So something I hear when I talk to folks about DevOps is they'll say, yeah, I'm sold, but I can't get any buy-in from anyone else. This is a problem that we all face. And this report will help you potentially advocate internally to folks to say, this matters, this is worth investing in. So this report's been running since 2014 with Dr. Nicole Forsgren as the lead researcher. It represents 6 years of research and data from 31,000 professionals worldwide. Did anyone here participate in the survey? We have one, we have two. Thank you for your data. Those of you who didn't, you will have a chance later on in this talk to do a live participation in our own little survey. You'll see, it's fun. It's fun. It's fun. This is the largest and longest running research of its kind, which gives us an independent view into the practices and capabilities that drive high performing. So the report is always focused on these 4 key metrics. These are like the 4 golden DevOps metrics. and they're rapidly becoming a standard for measuring DevOps progress. The metrics reflect effective software development and deployment. And this year, we also added an investigation into service operation. We're going to dig in on 6 key takeaways from this year's report. Number 1, DevOps is on a roll. Seriously, we're 10 years into DevOps, 6 years into this report, and as the growth of this conference and others can attest, this thing is happening. So the report uses cluster analysis and finds that there are clearly identifiable groups of practitioners. These are archetypes of how teams perform. Last year was the first time that their analysis revealed this elite group. And these teams are way outperforming the pack. And they're continually revising our understanding of what's possible upward. This year, check it out, the elite performers have almost tripled. Also take a look that the proportion of low performers is down. So that reflects a continued shift in the industry as organizations continue to transform their technology. The proportion of medium performers is up. So it's reasonable to say from these data that DevOps has crossed the chasm. This is happening. This is becoming an ongoing growth engine within our organizations. Key finding number 2. This one is sort of the no news is good news because the good news was already there. We see continued evidence that software speed, stability, and availability contribute to organizational performance, including profitability, productivity, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, retention. All of these things reinforce each other. Our highest performers are twice as likely to meet or exceed their organizational performance goals. So usually you can't have your cake and eat it too. But the data speaks, and it says, let them eat DevOps. It's kind of, I think, intuitive to expect that increasing your throughput is going to hurt your reliability, right? But for 6 years in a row, the data have said that we can have both. In fact, the research consistently shows that speed and stability are outcomes that actually enable and reinforce each other. Third, people are important all throughout the organization. High performers favor strategies that create community structures at both low and high levels in the organization, including communities of practice and proofs of concept, likely making them more sustainable and resilient to reorgs and product changes. And what we find is that the elite teams really are focusing on that communication, the community, the colleagueship among the people in the organization who are driving this transformation. And some of the techniques that are used successfully are things like communities of practice, grassroots campaigns, a proof of concept as a template or a proof of concept as a seed. The details of what this means can be found in the report, but basically what it suggests is that embedding the concept into the practitioner life, into the workflow of people who are on the ground doing it is really effective. Some things are not so effective. And so things like training centers or centers of excellence that, while super well-intentioned, tend to pull the expertise out, isolate it somewhere else in the organization, or anything that's about treating DevOps as something to be taught or something to be certified. There's nothing wrong with learning DevOps through curriculum, but if we're not experiencing it and sharing it and iterating on it internally to our organization, we're probably not going to make it stick. And another thing that we know is that a big bang approach, trying to say, our 100,000 person organization, we're all DevOps from now on, it's probably not going to work that well. Just as DevOps is about continuously improving, we have to continuously iterate ourselves to a DevOps practice. Cloud. Cloud is a big factor. And while DevOps doesn't necessarily mean cloud, there's a real high correlation there. And so it's a good place to look to find the abilities to unlock a DevOps transformation. Teams who are delivering fast and maintaining high availability are much more likely to be getting there with the help of cloud technologies. However, we need to be careful about what we mean when we say cloud. Cloud's just one little word. It matters how we use cloud, because cloud's a slippery term in my experience. It's perfectly reasonable to say that Dropbox is a cloud provider. But that's not what we mean when we talk about cloud infrastructure for DevOps. But there is a simple definition, and the NIST made one. They have a 2-page definition that they came out with, and it's really concise. They say there are 5 characteristics of what cloud really is: on-demand self-service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and measured service. The adoption or the implementation of these capabilities in organizations varies widely. And so a lot of folks are using cloud, and that's awesome, and I happen to like when people use cloud, but we want people to use cloud well and really get benefits. So to further clarify, it's not just that the highest performing teams are using cloud. The highest performing teams were 24 times as likely as low performers to meet all 5 of these criteria of cloud computing. Only 29% of respondents met all 5 characteristics of cloud computing. The good news is if you're already on cloud, you have access to these things. But the hard news is that there's probably work to be done to really unlock those capabilities. Because too many organizations think, well, I'm paying for cloud, I've got a cloud bill, therefore I must be doing cloud, and yet they're not seeing results. It's like purchasing a gym membership. That's only the first step, as my body can attest. You have to actually go. Are you actually taking advantage of these 5 cloud characteristics? And if not, you may end up getting no value, or even being worse off than before starting the cloud. There are key benefits that the cloud can offer that are obviously beneficial to what you're doing. So first is that fast auto-scaling. This is my favorite part about the cloud, elasticity. That we only need to buy the infrastructure we need. We can scale it up and scale it down as necessary for our business. Cost visibility, and this is a hard change for the cloud for a lot of folks. You go from having this CapEx where you know what you're going to spend, but you don't know how you're using it, to flipping it around. You don't always know what you're going to spend, though there are ways to mitigate that, but you know exactly where it's going and whether it's giving you a benefit or not. And third, security. Now, we all kind of want security to be someone else's problem, right? But we also all know that we need to make it everyone's problem. It's all of us. There's no way to simply outsource security, which is why we have this term like DevSecOps. I think that happened when some security person looked at DevOps and said, hey, wait a sec. But while we can't simply make security someone else's problem, what we can do is isolate it and make it constrained in the sense that if you have a cloud provider platform, you know that security of a certain kind is going to be isolated for that provider, and you are putting them on the hook to maintain security there. And they're probably darn good at it, because it's not just a few people's business data they have to secure, it's all of it. And I would rather let someone else worry about patching all of the VMs than doing it myself. Who has heard the term psychological safety? It's okay, it's just a safe place to admit. This sounds like a kind of a gooey, squishy term, and it is. And it's a great term. We did something at Google years ago, ran a study of which teams are more productive or more effective than others. More effective from a business perspective. And what we found that the most important characteristic of a highly performant team at delivering business value was the presence of psychological safety. Psychological safety means having the ability to express yourself, to take risks, to be vulnerable with your team, so that your team can be a learning environment. The State of DevOps report finds the same thing, that to support productivity, organizations need to foster a culture of psychological safety. Also make smart investments in tooling, information search, and reducing technical debt through flexible, extensible, and viewable systems. So here's an example on the tooling side. The usefulness and ease of use of deployment tooling is highly correlated with successfully implementing continuous integration and continuous delivery, CI/CD. This makes sense, because the better our tools are suited to the work we do, the better we are able to do our work. This drives productivity. It also drives employee satisfaction and retention. Let's talk changes and how changes get made. Heavyweight change approvals, such as change approval boards, CABs, negatively impact speed and stability. Anyone here ever get hit by a cab? It really slows you down, right? Whereas having a clearly understand process for changes drive speed and stability, as well as reductions in burnout. But what about enterprise? Enterprise needs these controls, right? And unfortunately, what we found is that these heavyweight processes tend to drive enterprises to be lower performers on the State of DevOps report. What we find is enterprises have worse performance on speed and stability metrics. So they're going to need to focus hard on that. Does that mean that big orgs are doomed? No. There are strategies to help anyone, especially large organizations, improve. Things like what automation and process improvements should be tackled at the organization level for maximum impact versus the team level, and everyone can work together. So something you'll find in the report is a lot of practical tactics for how to implement and scale DevOps in your organization. No matter how big your organization is, it can be done. So, how do we apply this research to the work our team is doing? Well, one thing we know for sure, we can't make measurable improvements if we don't take any measurements. We need to know where we're starting from. And for that, we have what's called a DevOps quick check. So, let's take a look. We are going to launch the DevOps quick check. And we're going to go through this together. So I just clicked over to cloud.google.com/DevOps. This is a newly launched. We launched this alongside the State of DevOps report this year. It's got a ton of resources. I'm going to zoom in because I can't see it up here, and that means you probably can't see it. Oh, and you won't see this. That's an internal tool. Okay, so what you'll see here is a definition of DevOps. There's a cute little video. This is adorable, which is about kind of just high level of what this report does and what's going on there. Then, perhaps you feel like I'm a broken record. That's on purpose. You can download this report. Go check it out. It's free. And then, as I mentioned, the DevOps quick check. So right now, welcome everyone here. You're all part of a new company called Columbatech. And we are a Fortune 500 company, and we are going to find out how we're doing on DevOps. Let's take the quick check. Here we go. So the first question related to these key Dora metrics is lead time. And that question is, how long does it take from the time that a commit is made to a repo until it's actually live in prod and a user can make use of it? And interpret live in prod as whatever's appropriate for your kind of software. So who here has that it takes more than 6 months for a commit to land in prod? Maybe you have a yearly research cycle. No? No one? Okay. How about 1 month to 6 months? Okay. 1 week to 1 month? That looks like a lot. 1 day to 1 week? A lot there too. Less than 1 day. Yeah, we have a few. What about less than 1 hour? There's a pocket over here. Over here are the fast people. All right, let's go with 1 week to 1 month. Sounds about where we're at. All right, next. How often do you deploy? The highest performing teams deploy a lot. And remember, no judgments here. The whole point here is that we all want to find out where we are and improve. So how often are we deploying? Is it fewer than once every 6 months? Who's got a yearly or 9-month deploy cycle? Cool. It's always good when I see people sitting next to each other who probably work together answering the same. That means at least they know where they're at. All right, how about between 1 month and every 6 months? Like a monthly release cycle, quarterly? Couple. Between once per week and once per month. That's a lot. Yep. Between once per day and once per week. Okay. Okay. So not a lot of people on a weekly release cycle. Between once per hour and once per day. We're getting pretty fast here. What about on demand? Multiple deploys per day. You know, what was it? That photo set that it launched this whole DevOps thing. Cool. All right. It sounds like once a week to once a month is about where most people are. All right. MTTR. Folks know that phrase? Mean time to restore. It means when there's a problem, and let's be honest, there will be problems. How long does it take to get from services impact, oh crap, to it's okay, everyone relax and go back to playing Roblox? Is that more than 6 months? This is real. It happens. What about 1 to 6 months? Okay. This is a web crowd, it seems, or I know there's a lot of retail folks here. You're not, probably not can't tolerate that. 1 week to 1 month. 1 day to 1 week. Couple. Less than 1 day. Less than 1 hour. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go with less than 1 day to restore from a serious impact. And then how often do those deployments fail? So we've got 0 to 15% of all deployments require remediation. It's actually not backward. You know what? I'm going to start over from the backwards place. 76 to 100% of deployments require remediation. I have seen people say yes to this. We had a big hug, and then I said, go, you got to fix something. 61 to 75%. How about 46 to 60%? About half of deployments require remediation. 31 to 45%? I know this gets a little particular, but good. Okay, we have someone who thinks there. 16 to 30%? Yeah. And 0 to 15%. Okay, most folks are in that zone. Okay, and then finally, one last question. So you can see this is a quick survey. What is our industry? So here at, what did we call us? Columba Tech. What industry are we in? Someone shout out your industry. Finance seems either the most common or the loudest, which is actually kind of my suspicion. All right, let's see how we're doing. So everyone obviously can go and run this test for your own business. You can run it on your mobile phone. And what we'll see is that over here, things to the right are generally better, more of what we're looking for. So what we can see here is that we are kind of on par. We actually did pretty good on these bottom two, which are about our recovery stats. So it seems like we have good kind of stability, but our throughput is maybe lagging a little behind the industry. Actually, this is the overall, my bad. But same deal. We're lagging a little behind the industry, and you know, we probably would benefit from catching up, or benefit even more from outperforming those. So what do we do about that? Well, you will find, after a lot more breakdown, you will find here on cloud.google.com/devops, this is now an ongoing, evolving asset of information from the Dora folks. And what the Dora folks found, and they've found this for several years now, is that there are a set of capabilities that define who can achieve, who correlates with who's achieving these high-performing DevOps results. And the more of these capabilities you are mastering, the better you're likely to do. So, and what you'll find on this site is a detailed article written on each of these capabilities. These are provided by folks in the DevOps community at Google and in the Dora report. A lot of this content was curated by Jez Humble, who wrote the book on continuous delivery, and of course Nicole Forsgren has done a ton of curation here to make these really important articles. So who here does version control? Yeah, we've all done that one, right? Continuous integration. I was in a great breakout session yesterday where we learned that there's a big variety of folks whether they're doing continuous integration or not. Now, it's pretty clear from the analysis here that continuous integration is a good thing and is going to be probably good for the business. And in fact, we show that causative effect. Folks who do continuous integration, folks who do continuous delivery are more likely to have high-performing DevOps teams. Deployment automation, trunk-based development. It's another thing that can vary a lot. Typical practice is going to be to people to develop on long-lived feature branches. What we've found is that that is unfortunately correlated with less high performance. It's better to be constantly merging back into master. Test automation, architecture. Well, everyone has an architecture, but this describes a bit of what good architecture could be. And so you can see if you click on any of these, you pop in and you get an article that has a lot of detail here on how to make improvements and how to measure your improvements. So one of the things that is always a question about this DevOps report is, okay, but how do I do that? What do I go back and do today? And you'll find that all of the articles say, how? That wasn't how. How? There we go. How to do it. And here's a bunch of information that you can use to take back to your organization. All right, let's flip back to here. So, once again, you can find the report, you can find that quick check analysis, and you can find all those great articles at this website. So again, how do we take that information and bring that back into our organization? There are so many changes. There's so much to do. Well, one thing article you'll find is something called DevOps Culture, How to Transform. And this is also reflected deeply in the report this year. So for folks who have read the report before, do read it again. The new one has some really great new content. And one of the great pieces it has is very practical advice for how do I get from here to there. And once you've identified constraints, we need to apply a continuous improvement approach to it. So folks here may be familiar with a kata model. This comes out of Toyota and their process for pulling the cord and analyzing what's happening and doing better every time. So the first thing to do is identify your key bottleneck. And you find this in lean manufacturing, you find this in the Phoenix project, right? If you're not addressing the single core bottleneck of what is hurting your velocity or stability, nothing else matters. Find that bottleneck, find the capability that you need to improve on. And set a goal, a reasonable goal, make it happen, iterate, and rinse and repeat. Finally, once again, download the report. If you don't like typing, you can scan this QR code and you can grab that report. You can do your own quick check, compare your results, see how you're doing. It's perfectly fine if you do a quick check, don't tell anyone. Go make a bunch of improvements and then do your next quick check and you say, look, I'm doing great. But whatever that is, it's probably not going to be enough for the future. So get started, get iterating, and please, give us feedback. Tell us if this information is valuable to you, how you're using it, what techniques you're finding valuable, how you're able to promote these ideas within your organization. Thank you. Yeah, I said earlier that I'm doing my job if I just stand here and put this logo up. So
I don't know where we are on the time. Do we have?
We're actually a little short, so
questions?
if we want to do questions, we can do questions.
All right. Anybody have any questions? Raise your hand. I'll come to you.
Questions, success stories, failure stories?
The report for 2019 showed that there were growth in elite level performers, but the percentage of high level performers went down. Can you expand on that?
I think, obviously the high level performers, some of them moved to elite, hooray. I don't believe the correlations are done across time because my understanding of the report methodology, it's not like we can track individual folks so that instead it's aggregate. So the researchers have believed that some of them have moved up to elite, which is great. Some of them may have fallen back to medium. Either they weren't able to sustain some of their changes, and that speaks a bit to that culture of communication and community about creating sustainable practice. And also, the standards have gotten higher. Everyone has upped their game. So if you were a high performer, you might not be anymore. So if I have the question right, it's can a high-performing team be globally distributed as opposed to co-located?
Right.
Yeah. So that's a hard one. And maintaining a good distributed team is hard. The report speaks to some of this, which says that it's more about culture, communication styles. It's more about how you set team objectives. So you absolutely can be a high-performing team distributed. What is essential is to have a team be cross-discipline, multidiscipline. A team has autonomy to develop their product, so a product team as opposed to a project team. And one thing that the Dora folks in their Soda report do find is that functional outsourcing is negatively correlated with performance. So you can have your QA person live on a different continent. What you can't really have if you want to do really well is say, QA is someone else's problem. We hired a company and we just throw it over the wall to them.
Yeah, question on what worked and what didn't work. Can you elaborate, give maybe some examples of what did work and go a little bit deeper into what didn't work and then what did work, and particularly the grassroots movement and community of practice, just what that looked like?
Right. Yeah. So one thing that we see in successful transformations a lot is that it always starts with someone or someones who are excited about doing this and see the benefits and want to make it happen. It works if you have a group of people who are embedded in their teams. Usually if it's someone who's you have a sysadmin in one team and a developer in another team, and they're coming together to share information, to bring their findings to each other and bring the findings from each other back to their teams. So these folks are embedded in those product teams and working for those product teams. What doesn't tend to work so well, what we've seen in some organizations, is they'll hire in a bunch of DevOps and kind of put them in a room somewhere and say, all right, you're the DevOps team, go be excellent. And they develop a bunch of best practices and they create a huge Confluence wiki and whatever, and it doesn't just percolate out because they're not engaged with folks. Now that said, something that does work really well is exchange programs. So something that people do, as we mentioned, is that you can't do everyone at once. So take a product team and engage them, empower them to do a DevOps transformation. And then have a couple of them switch with someone from a different team. And they'll both learn from each other. Or have that, that organization, some folks have like a DevOps transformation team. Cool. But that DevOps transformation team can't just, sit in an office somewhere and not talk to anyone. They have to go out and maybe they do rotations into teams or whatever. The whole point being that you have to transform the people the work of the people who are doing the work. You can't stitch it on externally.
Yeah, I have a little confusion, I guess. When we talk cloud, to me, that means like you're hosted somewhere else, right? Can you have a successful DevOps team in-house using your own corporate servers and the like?
Hey, cloud is just someone else's computer, right? The answer is absolutely yes. And in fact, from the perspective of this analysis, my understanding is that it doesn't matter whether the cloud is the public cloud or a private cloud. What matters is that we have those capabilities of users can self-provision their infrastructure rather than some long provisioning process with forklifts. You have that elasticity so they can burst up when they need it. And those other capabilities which can absolutely be created on an in-house platform or in a multi-cloud or hybrid platform.
Hello. Could you give me an example on a success story of DevOps in a data warehouse space? How does that work when it is a source of reference system and you're just depending on data coming in from the source of record?
Oh, the database. That's always the hard part, right? The success stories I've heard in there, a lot of it is about to be honest, is more about the analysis and using of that data side, where whatever tools you are using, whether it's ML or BI, whatever, iterating quickly on that and rapidly releasing your new models or new analysis tools. You can have a lot of that. The data warehouse itself is kind of still a hard problem, I would say, and my hunch is kind of resistant to a lot of these kinds of changes. That said, we heard a great talk yesterday about the kind of DevOps from a sysadmin, a database administrator's perspective, and how we could take these heavyweight systems that seem really hard to deal with, and bit by bit, kind of incrementally make them more like infrastructure as code, make them more like immutable deploys and things like that. So I think it can be done. I think you won't see a ton of literature yet about transforming that. I hope you'll write it.
Big hand for Dave. I guess I found the hot mic. This is the one, if I project my voice into it, I make the room vibrate. Now it's the fun time where we celebrate the people who bought us coffee. So we have a company called Data Robot. They actually acquired a startup in Columbus called Nexosis. So Data Robot has presence in Columbus. Please welcome Chris, who is going to tell us more about what they have going on.
Good morning. How's everyone doing? Awesome. I'm Chris Mcdermott, and as he said, I'm from DataRobot. For those of you who haven't heard of us yet, we're a platform for doing data science and automated machine learning. We've got customers in a bunch of different industries, from retail and investment banking to healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, you name it, we're there. We've helped customers build models to predict things like how much inventory to stock in their stores, whether or not to approve a loan, and even what price to pay for a used tractor at an auction. We've got a team of field engineers and data scientists that engage with our customers. They can help you dig into your data and help you solve real business problems. So as you might imagine, we have a hot product. It's a hot market. We're also hiring like crazy. So we're based out of Boston. Our headquarters are there, but we have an office here in Columbus, Denver, San Antonio, San Francisco, Tokyo, Singapore, Copenhagen, Munich, all over the Ukraine. We're everywhere. So we have a table right outside the booth area. I encourage you all to stop by and say hello. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris. Now I would like to welcome our next sponsor. Of course, a company who I've done business with for many years, and many of us know application performance monitoring. I'd like to welcome Jared and his partner with New Relic.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jared Kenyon. I'm the local account manager here for New Relic based in Columbus, Ohio. For any of you who stopped by our booth yesterday, thank you for stopping by, and make sure to stop by today, say hello. Currently going on right now out in New York, we are presenting at our user conference called FutureStack, and we have a lot of great new features being announced around logging, around AI ops, and around programmability. So a lot of cool things going on. Feel free to stop by. We'll tell you a little bit more about it, and I'll let Robert introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Jared's partner, Robert McGowan. So just to introduce New Relic for those of you that don't know what it is that we do, or maybe haven't seen us for a while. New Relic is an end-to-end observability platform built to handle your busiest day in your most complex environment, which is what we're all looking for, I hope.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks so much, New Relic. Appreciate your support. Now I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, who is going to be talking about a very important topic, something we often consider as it relates to DevOps culture and practices. Please welcome Marika.
Hi, everyone. All right, my clicker works. Can you all hear me on this mic? I can also project more so that the folks in the back can hear me. Good morning, I'm Marika Crum-Hansel. I am so happy to be here at Devopsdays Columbus, and I want to extend a really heartfelt thank you to all the organizers. It's been a real pleasure to come to Columbus for the first time and be so warmly received, so thank you. I'd like to share some of the things that I've learned from managing DevOps engineers and also trying to implement a DevOps culture transformation. So for those that didn't see my technical talk yesterday, just a quick introduction. I'm currently the DevOps manager at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Powell's is the largest independent bookstore in the United States. Outside of work, I also volunteer with the PDX Women in Tech organization, where I volunteer as a speaker with them. Outside of work, I am an avid earthquake emergency preparedness fanatic. Some of you may be aware that Portland is in the Cascadia subduction zone, and so I volunteer with the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management to prepare my neighborhood and neighborhoods across Portland for that. I also dance in an Estonian folk dancing troupe. Thank you. And I love to read, so working at Powell's Books is basically a dream come true. Okay, so I have a confession. My own job title makes me really uncomfortable, right? DevOps manager. It's like, so I'm responsible for DevOps? Is no one else responsible for DevOps? I mean, that's like hiring a QA manager and expecting them to inject quality into your product at some point during the process, right? Am I just supposed to sprinkle some DevOps on it and everything will be great? Yeah, sounds great. So although it makes me uncomfortable, my title makes me uncomfortable, I do absolutely love what I do. And I think that the role that I play is really important from all companies. So I know that there has been discussion on social media and honestly for the entire history of the DevOps movement. Is DevOps a job title or is it a philosophy, right? I know that there are some folks who have really strong opinions about that one way or the other. If you think about the acronym CALMS, which stands for Culture, Automation, Lean, Metrics, and Sharing. So these are the pillars of a successful DevOps mindset at a company, right? And culture comes in at the top. And I don't think that's an accident, right? In order for a DevOps mindset to really be successful at an organization, the whole organization needs to make it part of the culture. And so it can't just be one person's job or a group of people's job. DevOps is definitely a philosophy, right? All right. So I worked at a company that very much embraced this perspective, and we didn't have anyone in the engineering org that had the title of DevOps engineer or operations engineer or anything like that. Everyone was just software engineer, right? And what that meant was that when our CI pipeline had an issue, there was a build outage, or the disk on our binary repo filled up, people from various teams ended up running to the fire and helping to resolve the issue in the moment and then kind of going back to their teams, right? We had essentially communal ownership of our internal tools. And so what we ended up with was this. We had Howl's Moving Castle, and what that meant was that, it was brittle, it was not scalable, our delivery pipeline was very leaky, and so, these are business critical tools, right? And they deserve better. And so, you definitely need to hire folks who focus on that stuff, who have a vision for it, and that the tools then are owned by folks that can make sure that those tools can support where the company is going. So you got to hire, whatever you call them automation engineers, call them delivery engineers. But I'm going to put these in air quotes. You got to hire the engineers that are going to focus on the automation that makes the DevOps go, right? And so here is a bit of a conundrum for someone like me who has the role of DevOps manager, is that the skills that make you a good manager of DevOps engineers is a absolutely completely different set of skills that make you good at organizational transformation, at the cultural side of DevOps transformation. And so you can choose to be either good at one or the other. I have attempted to try to do both. And so what I'd like to do for the remainder of my talk is just share some of the things that I've learned about managing DevOps engineers, what is unique about that, managing DevOps culture in an organization, and then just being real about what it is to be a DevOps manager. Okay, so to start out with, to be a good manager of DevOps engineers, you just got to be a good manager, right? Which means you need to have really good communication with your direct reports. So regular one-on-ones are a really core and important part of being a good manager to DevOps engineers. Side note, so on certain slides, you'll see this Powell's logo in the bottom corner. This indicates that there's a book on this slide that I find helpful or have found really relevant and helpful for me on this topic. Okay, so the reason that for DevOps managers, it's especially important to have close professional communication with your direct reports is because DevOps engineers tend to experience a lot of thrash in the work that they're doing, and do a lot of toil. And so when I say thrash, an example of that is that I, as the DevOps manager, was leading a team at a company, and we were working on the highest priority thing, and ran into a major blocker because we had a dependency on another team, right? And this is really common when you're working on a DevOps team, because the tools that you're building are really relied upon and rely on a lot of what the other teams are doing. And so the other team was unable to unblock us for another couple sprints, so we switched gears and started working on the next highest priority thing, and then suddenly there was a major build outage, and we shifted focus to that. And unfortunately, this is kind of a fact of life for folks working in this type of space. And so as a manager, you just need to make sure that you're setting appropriate expectations for yourself, and that your folks are setting appropriate expectations for themselves. And that really happens best by having frequent one-on-ones. Toil, on the other hand, is the manual, repetitive work, and a lot of folks that respond to production outages do a lot of toil, unfortunately. Oh yeah, it's this error, that means we need to go restart this server over here again, right? And these are things that could be automated, but the folks have not been given the chance to automate that toil away. And unfortunately, both of these things, thrash and toil, can contribute to a kind of feeling of burnout among DevOps engineers. And burnout is a state in which the worker or the person is feeling completely disengaged from their work, dread coming to work in the morning. It is actually kind of really a mental health issue. And so here are a couple of talks that I recommend on burnout if you would like to learn more about that. But as a DevOps manager, it is absolutely your responsibility to make sure that your folks are being taken care of and that they're not suffering from burnout. Okay, so unique thing about being a DevOps manager is that not only are you the engineering manager, but you have to know all of the other Agile roles and responsibilities too. You won the jackpot. So not only am I the engineering manager, but I'm also the product owner, the Scrum Master, the individual contributor at times, because DevOps teams are small and everyone needs to pitch in. And then at times, I have been the most experienced person, and therefore kind of fill in the role of the tech lead or architect. And so I'm going to talk about these two for a second. So as the product owner, actually, can I see a show of hands? How many of you here work at a company where the team that does the internal tools, so like the DevOps team, actually has a product owner dedicated to them? Wow, you are so lucky. There was just a handful of hands. I have never been so lucky as to work at a company that dedicated a product owner to the internal tools team. And so I have had to play that role a few times. And what that means is that I've had to translate the company level strategy into a prioritized backlog for the team. I have to understand the users of the tools, of the products that I'm building, essentially. And so user personas are a thing, right? Like the tool that I build for the QA folks is going to look different than the tool that I build that the customer support team needs to use, right? And you need to understand the key workflows, because if you forget one of the key workflows for one of your user personas, you're definitely going to hear about it. So that's important to understand your users. You also need to be able to describe the value of the work that you're delivering. And so I've gotten really good at thinking about how to translate, increases in efficiency into things that the business cares about, right? Because that's really hard. And as a product owner for DevOps tools, you need to know how to do that for your business leaders. And so I've got to do all the product owner stuff, like I'm creating epics, I'm leading backlog grooming meetings, I'm prioritizing the backlog. And that takes a lot of time, but I would rather do that for my team than ask someone else on my team to do that for me. Okay, so as a tech lead and architect, what a DevOps manager often needs to do is design the technical tools and the technical solutions that meet the business needs. and doing this in a way that keeps the overall company vision and strategy in mind. And this actually means that you need to take your own ego out of the equation, because although I would love to learn how to use Kubernetes, like I can't just do Kubernetes if it doesn't make sense for the business, right? So, so this is about choosing the right tools for the problem. And being able to describe the technical pathway that's going to get you from where you are today to where you need to be. If at all possible, like I would recommend that you hire someone smarter than yourself to play this role, because if you're doing all of those agile roles, right, engineering manager and product owner and scrum master and individual contributor and tech lead, at some point there's going to be a serious conflict of interest, and you owe it to your team to remove as much conflict of interest as possible. Okay, I'm going to get real for a second. Can you please raise your hand if the company that you work for has said, at least internally, that diversity is important to your company? Okay, so I see most people's hands raised. Can you please now keep your hands raised or raise your hands if your company's diversity efforts have actually worked? That is incredible. That's awesome. So unfortunately, this is not the case for many companies, right? Across the country, diversity and inclusion efforts are failing pretty badly in a lot of companies because those efforts are being led by white folks. And so just due to unconscious bias on our part, tend to focus on white folks' issues, which means that, oddly enough, diversity efforts tend to benefit white folks more than the folks that they are intending to benefit. So I am a white cis woman, and there's nothing wrong with being white. But even as a woman, right? We talk a lot about women in tech and getting positions for women in technical positions. As a white woman in tech, it's easier for me often to get hired into positions than it is for my colleagues who are Black or my colleagues who are Indigenous, for people of color, or for folks who are transgender or gender nonconforming. And diversity is important. And I could go over so many different studies that describe how diverse teams are more creative, they are better problem solvers, that companies with diverse leadership are better performing in the market. But really, the reason that we should care about diversity is because we're compassionate human beings, and it is much more difficult for folks in underrepresented communities to be hired. And so, as a DevOps manager, I have an obligation to use my power for good, and I hope that you will as well. And so what this means is that I recommend that you, as a DevOps manager, a hiring manager, provide entry-level positions on your team. Bear in mind, I'm not saying that every position on your team needs to be an entry-level position. Obviously, you need to get work done, so you need at least a mid or maybe a senior. But even if you have just a team of two, right? One of those can be a mid or senior, and the other one can be an entry-level position. And then prioritize hiring folks from underrepresented communities into those entry-level positions. And when you do that, you do a few things. You have several benefits. You provide a pathway for underrepresented folks into tech. And this can be a truly life-changing opportunity for these folks. You also provide really valuable mentorship opportunities for your mid to senior folks, right? You pair the entry-level folks together with your mid to senior. And this is a great career development opportunity for those more senior folks. And then finally, by pairing on work together, you just raise the quality of work that is delivered. And so everyone benefits. All right. So now I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about managing DevOps culture. So here's the thing. DevOps transformations are huge organizational changes, right? And the thing is that in addition to DevOps being a big organizational change, it kind of goes hand in hand with an agile transformation, right? You can't really do one successfully without doing the other. If you try and just do an agile transformation without also doing a DevOps transformation, you're going to have very limited success, right? And this is a big cultural change for a company. And so what I would recommend is that even if you're not a DevOps manager, but you're wanting to make some changes at your company on this front, that you become familiar with organizational change management frameworks. So just a step back for a second. When I say change management, I'm not talking about old school like ITIL change management practices where you're worried about changes to production environments and you've got change request tickets and whatnot, right? When I talk about change management, I'm talking about changing the complex, nonlinear, adaptive systems of behavior of people that kind of makes up a culture at a company, right? And a DevOps transformation is organizational change. So there's actually a whole field of study on organizational change management, and John Cotter has a framework for it that really resonated with me. And there are these 8 steps or 8 phases that he calls out, and all of them are important. And if you miss any of them, your change effort could fail. But I'm going to talk about these 4 because I just chose to talk about these 4. So in order for your DevOps transformation, or really any organizational change to be successful, the most important and most difficult thing to do is to generate a sufficiently strong sense of urgency around the change. And essentially what the company needs to come to an agreement on is that the status quo is not seen as a viable option, right? So as a DevOps manager, your job is to scare people, but carefully, right? So what I mean by this is that you can't go around lying, right? You can't say things like, well, if we don't do DevOps, our company is going to go out of business, right? Because that's probably not true. I mean, in reality, what's probably going to happen is your company is just not going to be as successful as it could be, right? And you can't go around scaring people to such an extent that they are like panicked, right? You can't say things like, well, if we don't start delivering more and faster, we're going to lay off the entire like onshore engineering team and just outsource everything, right? Because then people are just going to run around like they've got their chickens with their heads cut off and not make any like valuable contributions. They're just wanting to look busy, right? So you can say things that are true and that speak to people's emotions and that make it, the status quo seen as not being the acceptable, viable solution. So you can say things like, our company is too slow to compete with competitor X, or our quality is too low and our customers are losing faith, right? And DevOps can help with that. You also need to create a sufficiently strong guiding coalition. And what this means, unfortunately, is that you do need at least one champion who is at the top of the organization. You also need at least one very strong technical individual contributor, right? And so the reason you need this high-level champion is because that is the person that is going to be able to redirect budget or allow you to reorganize your engineering organization so that you can break down those barriers and create that type of DevOps culture, right? The harsh reality is that grassroots efforts at DevOps transformation have really limited success. You might be able to make some changes within your own team or like locally, but if you want that sweeping organization-wide change, like you need to have someone at the top that can cut through that red tape. The harsh reality for a DevOps manager is that I'm middle management. So I am neither the C-level exec nor, often the very strong technical individual contributor. And so my job is to relentlessly lobby a C-level exec and to get a tech lead or someone on board with this change effort. You also need a clear vision and strategy. So these are 2 different things, right? Vision is your North Star. It should be succinct. It should be something that really speaks to people's emotions and very easily understandable. It's something like, vision is that we will ship measurable value to customers every day, right? And then your strategy is essentially how you're going to get there from where you are today. And often this is written in terms of objectives and key results. If your company uses OKRs, like often strategy is described in terms of those goals, right? Unfortunately, companies are really bad at this very often, right? I unfortunately have had a lot of trouble at some of the companies that I've worked at with setting goals and having really clear goals. And so as a DevOps manager, I have had to manage up a lot, which means that I've been having to keep my own boss accountable to setting really specific, measurable, actionable, relevant and timely goals, SMART goals, right? And that my peers also do that for their teams. And at the very least, like, I've been adamant about making sure that anyone underneath me or who reports to me has really clear goals. And then finally, you need to create short-term wins, because these short-term wins create and sustain the momentum around your change effort. And often these wins will convert the undecided folks into true believers. And so as a DevOps manager, like, you need to show irrefutable proof that you're on the right track with this DevOps transformation stuff. And often this comes in the form of a pilot. So a pilot should be doable in a year or less with the team that you have. It should have demonstrable business value, and it should be measurable progress along the way. And this will show the rest of the company that we should continue to invest in this DevOps transformation stuff. Okay, so I have a third confession for this talk, and that is that I have struggled leading DevOps teams and also leading a DevOps transformation. It's hard. And so here are the realities of managing DevOps engineers and managing DevOps culture, right? Like, I know I have heard from engineers and from folks who are individual contributors that, you know, man, if only management buy-in, if we had management buy-in, we could do this DevOps thing, right? I'm here to tell you that I'm in management, I buy into it, and I still have a really hard time with it. So it's not just like even if management is bought in, like, it's hard, and it's a whole organizational change effort. Okay, so here's the reality. As a manager of DevOps engineers, like, DevOps teams are chronically understaffed. By the time the company decides that, like, yes, we're gonna hire folks to focus on this automation stuff over here, like, you're probably already dealing with a dumpster fire, right? And so no small DevOps team is gonna be able to address the actual quantity of tech debt in that area. In particular, like, my personal experience at a place that I worked was that I had a tiny team. I was in an organization of about 50 engineers, and my tools team was it was myself and one person that reported to me plus a part-time intern, right? Like, you know, I am gonna do what I can with what I've got, but it was really difficult with that amount of capacity. Additionally, what we found was that we were running into issues understanding the boundaries of our ownership of these tools, right? Because we had so much dependence on other teams. Like, who owned what and was responsible for what became a constant negotiation, and that's hard. The other reality is that organizational change just is hard. Like, there wouldn't be this whole area of business research around organizational change management if it wasn't really difficult. So here's my challenges. Remember these 4 things? I feel like I had a really clear vision, and that my strategy, my goals were super clear around where I wanted to take the organization. And I set up and really got some great short-term wins. Unfortunately, like, the reality is that I did not generate a sufficiently strong sense of urgency at my company, and I did not get the buy-in from the C-level exec. And so I tried, and it was hard, and I was not able to do it in the time that I was there. But at the end of the day, DevOps is worth it, and we wouldn't be here today if we didn't all agree in this. So what do? You use the team that you have, right? You can use temporary staff augmentation or, like, use consultants or something, but really those folks don't care about the long-term maintainability of your tools. You need to use the team that you have, because those are the folks that are going to take it into the future. But you can beg, borrow, and steal folks from other teams to support you in this effort, and so I highly encourage you to do that. And then in terms of, like, just cultural stuff and continuing to make positive impact, prioritize ruthlessly and persevere. And so when I say prioritize, I think that this word is maybe not used appropriately at times. Prioritizing actually means you can make a list of the stuff that you are not going to do. So if you can only do the top 3 things in your prioritized backlog, what that really means is that you can and should say no to everything underneath that, right? And then finally, perseverance. Changing culture takes time. Even at a small company, it can take a long time. And in that case, patience is a virtue. And I fully admit that patience is not my greatest quality. But it is really important because it takes time to lead a transformation. Also, DevOps may not actually be the most important thing right now for the company. And in particular, like I have worked at a company that was struggling with the company vision and was really not that great at goal setting. And so those 2 things need to be in place before you're going to have a successful DevOps transformation. But once that's the case, like you can and should sell DevOps as a solution to most of your other problems, right? Quality, DevOps. Customer sat, DevOps. Time to market, right? So those are my thoughts. So basically, in summary, as a DevOps engineer, you end up needing to try and play both the management role as well as the cultural change agent role, and they're very different skill sets. To be a good manager to DevOps engineers, like keep an eye out for burnout, use your power for good when hiring, and make sure that you learn all the agile roles because you're probably going to end up playing most of them. As an agent of organizational change, become familiar with organizational change management frameworks. And then finally, it's okay to fail because you're trying, right? It's hard and it's understandable that, that there's going to be difficulties, right? But best opportunities for success come when you prioritize ruthlessly and you persevere and kind of stick with it for the long term. And with that, I'm going to leave you with a bunch of references, and I thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Marika. Glad to have you here. We don't have time for questions, but I'm sure Marika will be around. So if you have any questions or follow up from her presentation, look for her around the conference later. Now I'd like to welcome Steve from Urbancode, who's going to tell us a bit about what they do. Please welcome Steve.
Hey, thank you so much, guys. How many of you guys know Urbancode? Oh man, a lot of hands. That's awesome. So we're your friends just up north. We're located in Cleveland, Ohio. We've got a number of enterprise solutions, everything from continuous integration, continuous delivery, release orchestration. We're focused a lot these days on value stream management. How many of you bet you've been hit over that head with that term this week, right? If you don't know anything about those, come talk to us. We're over there at the booth. One of the cool things that we're really excited about right now is we're working with a lot of people up north to put together a Devopsdays Cleveland. So we're looking for speakers. We're looking for sponsors. We're looking for all those things. If you're interested in any of that, swing over at our booth. Come get a box of dots. How many of you got dots? Right? Yeah, rot your teeth. Those things are nothing but sugar. The cool thing about the dots are, if you look at it and you flip them over, some of them have stickers on the back, some of them don't, but it'll give you a link to our website. You can get free download of our latest product, Urbancode Velocity. Ties into work item trackers, build tools, monitoring tools, alert notifications. The whole idea is to help you visualize how work transfers throughout your organization from conception all the way into production. So come take a look at it. It pairs well with all the tools you already have. Really nice people. And at the worst case scenario, you can take some candy home to your kids because I don't want to take it up back north. All right? Very good. Thank you guys so much. If you're interested in Cleveland DevOps Days, come talk to us. Thank you guys. Appreciate you, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. Now I'd like to welcome Marcus. Who here knows what GitLab is? So I bet Marcus is going to have a cool story for us. I can't wait to hear what he's going to say.
Thanks. I think you kind of overhyped me there. But yeah, I'm with GitLab. We are the first single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle. Almost everyone here today is looking to move faster, develop better software faster, become more efficient in their development processes, or reduce their security and compliance risk. what GitLab does is really tie all of those aspects together into a single application. Make it really easy, make it so that developers don't have to spend all their time managing tools, integrations, and all that stuff into single applications so that you can just work and make it really simple so that you can go from SCM, CI, integrated security and monitoring and testing all in one place, have a single thread of collaboration, reduce context switching, and really improve that velocity. So we're GitLab, and if you haven't come seen us yet, come and stop by the booth. Thanks.
All right. Sorry, we've lost about 10 minutes on our break, so we're going to go ahead and break for 10 minutes and then come back, and we'll have Bill Horvath up. So I'll see you guys in 10 minutes.
This is me.
All right, if I can get everyone to please take your seats, we're going to get going again.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so we have Bill Horvath with Improving Enterprises here to talk about your work has, oh, I'm sorry, he works at Improving. It's not a sponsored pitch. Your work has moral implications. Own it.
Thank you. So in 2002, Andrew Pohl took a role as a senior manager of guest analytics at Target. He had a master's degree in applied statistics and one in economics, and according to the New York Times, he's a bit of a math nerd. And I should note here that I don't know Andrew, but I suspect he's just like you and me. He works hard and tries to do the right things. Shortly after he started at Target, he was approached by colleagues in the marketing department about whether he could determine whether any particular customer was pregnant using technological and statistical tools. For companies like Target, that kind of technology would be a gold mine. New parents are a retailer's holy grail. They'll be buying more things and more of them than they ever have before, which makes having them as customers very good for the bottom line. Now, it's important for me to point out right now that most people in marketing aren't bad folks. They're just like me and Andrew and hopefully all of you. We work hard and try to do the right thing. But the people in marketing are just like us in at least one other respect. They occasionally make poor choices. And it probably should have been a sign to Andrew that the people who wanted to predict who was pregnant said, even if she doesn't want us to know. It turns out that the technology that Andrew developed had some unintended consequences. A year or so after it hit the network, a man walks into Target demanding to see the manager. He wanted to know why Target was sending coupons to his teenage daughter for diapers and cribs. You might have heard how the rest of the story went. The man had a talk with his daughter. It turns out Andrew's analytics tool worked really, really well. So thank you for coming out today. I appreciate your attending. This is Pragmatic Ethics for Software Development Professionals, and I'm Bill Horvath. I'm a principal consultant for Improving in our Columbus office, and I'm delighted to be here to talk to you today about the implications of the work that we're doing and what we should do about that. Okay, on the count of three, I'd like you to all tell me your least favorite programming language. You ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, very good. Thank you. There's some good research in the psychological literature that suggests that audience participation predicts audience participation, which means you're now much more likely to participate with questions and comments. First, I need to issue some disclaimers. A lot of what we're going to talk about today has legal implications. I'm not an attorney. I know a few if you need one. Nothing you hear from me should be construed as legal advice, and you should consult an attorney if you need legal advice. You should consult an attorney if you need advice about whether you need legal advice, etc. Also, we have some ground rules for the discussion to make sure we don't create problems for yourselves if anyone has any questions. First, please don't talk about specific individuals or companies by name unless they're in the news. We don't want someone complaining that they were slandered in front of so many influential people. Second, don't discuss people, companies, or circumstances related to legal cases that are ongoing. If you do, we all become discoverable, and I don't know about you, but I don't want to burn PTO on court proceedings in Columbus or anywhere else. And third, be inclusive and kind. We're all here to learn and have a good time, and we can't do either if we're being knuckleheads. Okay, so the purpose of this talk is to help those of us who work for other people develop some pragmatic strategies for dealing with ethical quandaries at work. How many of us work for other people? Is that most of you? Cool, okay. I'm hoping you'll get three things out of this presentation. First, what actions to consider if you're asked to work on something morally questionable, which we'll call a moral crisis. to how you can position yourself to be able to handle being asked. And 3, if we have time, we'll delve a little bit into what malpractice is and whether it applies to software development. Okay, so first, let's talk about why we do the right thing. There are lots of things on which to base moral decisions. There's religious belief, of course, conscience, avoiding long-nose syndrome, but we're not going to address those here today. Why you do the right thing is entirely up to you. That's not really what I'm driving at here. But that does raise the question, how do we decide what the right thing to do is? There are a lot of strong ethical codes out there that are specific to software development, from IEEE, ACM, the Developers Trust Alliance, Scrum.org, etc. It turns out they have a few notable problems. One, they generally don't account for the power imbalance in the workplace, or they ignore it altogether. They generally tell you what not to do rather than what you might do in dealing with a moral crisis. And there's research suggesting that they're ignored in practice anyway. So what happens when we're asked to do something morally questionable by our employer? Some of us might fantasize about taking the moral high ground. I refuse to work at this morally depraved company. Here's my resignation. Good day, ma'am, and good luck finding someone who will. But in reality, we often grudgingly do the work, feel the shame and humiliation of having done something awful for money, possibly becoming vulnerable to liability for our actions, and stressed and dissatisfied with our jobs, all things I'm sure you'd agree, like to avoid. So what can we really do? In the US, we generally work under conditions of employment at will. This means that your employer does not need good cause to fire you. An at-will employee can be fired at any time for any reason, with very few exceptions. Historically, employees at major corporations formed unions to fight these kinds of problems, as there is strength in numbers. However, unionization is difficult, not guaranteed to be successful, and politically volatile, among other challenges. It's a viable solution, but not in the short term for someone faced with a moral crisis. The key to owning our moral destiny at work is owning the work that we do. If we own the work, we can respond respectfully and authoritatively to bad requests. So what do I mean by owning the work? To own the work, we have to be accountable. Accountability is the condition of being required or expected to justify actions or decisions. In other words, of being responsible. When we are accountable and we make a decision and take action, or actively do not take action, we must be able to explain why and how that path was taken, even if we made a poor choice. Now, why would we want to do this? Why would we want to be accountable for work that we do in service of our employer? Well, one is we can act like and be treated as the professionals that we are. We can act independently. We don't have to seek permission from others to act. We can make our own decisions about what to do and when and how to do it. We can take care of the customer in ways that we see fit so that we can deliver the best possible experience. And we can avoid a moral crisis in the first place because we're responsible for our own actions. We can't defer responsibility to someone else who told us what to do. For accountability to work, there are some preconditions that have to be met, however. We have to be honest. If we lie to ourselves, our colleagues, our superiors, or our customers, we are actively avoiding being accountable. We have to demonstrate integrity by avoiding hypocrisy at all costs. If we talk a good accountability game, then act in ways that avoid it, we're also actively avoiding being accountable. There must be psychological safety for us and our coworkers. We must trust one another to be candid when necessary and to be supportive, even when we make poor choices. And by the way, everyone makes poor choices, notably including myself. And our employers must agree that we're empowered to make decisions, not just when to go to the bathroom or what time to get to work, but how to get the work done in the best interests of the customer. This means deciding what we work on, when we work on it, and how we get it done. Well, it turns out that for a variety of psychological reasons that we won't get into today, these things are really hard. Setting up the conditions that support this kind of organizational culture takes a long time if it works at all. So what are we to do? Many of us already work for employers at which we may not have a degree of accountability. How can we protect ourselves from a moral crisis? Here's what I'd recommend if you're at an employer where you have no accountability. First, ask to work in a team. If it's done right, a team can be as effective as a union without all the overhead and dues. Once you've established a team-based environment, create psychological safety within the team. This gives everyone on the team accountability to one another. As a bonus, and this probably isn't a coincidence, studies show that psychological safety is overwhelmingly the greatest predictor of team effectiveness. Demand empowerment and accountability at the level of the team, such that the team owns the work, and this is critical. From the rest of the organization's perspective, the team should be a unit of accountability. If something goes well, the team gets credit. If something goes poorly, the team gets the blame. Not only does this enhance the internal accountability of the team, it gives the team members a shield to protect them when they have to make difficult judgment calls in an organization where accountability isn't a company-wide thing. You can build your personal savings and live frugally. Aside from all the other benefits, you have the freedom to walk away if you have to. You can join professional organizations like Conscious Capitalism or the Developers Trust Alliance and advertise your membership by wearing t-shirts or buttons, hanging membership certificates in your cube, or whatever you like. You'll be sending a signal to the rest of the organization that ethics are important to you. And in the long run, if all else fails and you for whatever reason want to continue working for your current employer, talk to your colleagues about forming a union. It may not be the best solution, but it sure beats not having any protection at all. So all this is nice, but what if you're faced with a moral crisis right now? What should you do? Here's what I'd recommend, and this is the part where me not being a lawyer bears repeating. Start with talking to management, of course, about your concerns. Talk to your boss, and your boss is not as amenable to what you're saying. You can get the team on board. It has this technique actually gets a fair amount of news coverage lately. For example, in 2018, when Google wanted to develop a new security feature called air gap for one of their products, 9 of their engineers banded together, signing papers saying they wouldn't do it because it would be used in military contracts, and they felt morally opposed to doing work used to wage war. And sure enough, Google postponed development of the feature and reduced its scope. Regardless of whether you have a team, however, remember that it might be management who came up with the unethical idea in the first place. If that's the case, you're less likely to be successful. If you come in with an attitude of this idea is unethical and I'm not doing it, you'll be insulting them and not giving them a solution to the problem. It's better to say something like, this feature might be putting the company at risk, even if it's not technically illegal. Could we do something else to achieve this goal that this feature is meant to accomplish? And going back to the scope thing, scope change, working to change the scope of the feature is another way you might be able to address your ethical concerns while giving the company the means of reaching their desired end. If you can say, I'm not comfortable with X because X puts the privacy of our customers at risk. However, if we do Y, we can reach our goal to make billions of dollars, and you can avoid getting subpoenas from Congress 2 years from now. That works to your advantage. Also consider raising interesting questions about the issue in meetings. You may be able to do so in a non-confrontational way, one that might be influential if you can get other people to nod their heads in agreement. And another tactic that might be effective depending on the circumstances is to work to delay the implementation of the feature in favor of other priorities, in the hopes that it won't be needed again later. This might work if, for example, a competitor gets into trouble for developing a similar feature and their faces get splashed all over the evening news with headlines like Acme's bossy McBoffface holds press conference to explain why their users' phone numbers have been hijacked and redirected to 900 numbers. If none of those tactics works, however, you're probably down to the nitty-gritty of doing the work or not. So here are a few options to consider. And note that this is the part where you start taking copious daily notes about who said what to whom and when. You can refuse to take the action in question, but do the rest of your job as you normally would. This, of course, might get you fired, and if you're fired for cause, you may not be able to claim workman's compensation benefits, which is a serious consideration. You could blow the whistle either higher up the chain of management or outside of the organization to a law firm, a news medium, or a government agency. Note that this has considerable risks. First, it might not work, of course. Second, it might bring harm to your friends at work, who, even if they're not directly retaliated against, might lose their jobs if the company goes down. And third, studies show that it rarely ends well for the whistleblower. You could look for a new job, of course. It's easier to find a new job when you have a job, so now would be the time. And your last resort may be walking out. But not only might that make it harder for you to get a new job, there may be other considerations about which you might want to consult an attorney first. So, finally, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about malpractice. And again, this is not me being an attorney. This is just based on my review of the literature about the topic. And a lot of us are familiar with the concept of malpractice from medicine, where if a doctor makes a mistake in treating you, they can be held liable in a court of law. You can file a lawsuit against them for that purpose. In 2002, there's a paper by Sproul and Camel in which they wrote the following, and I'm quoting here. Malpractice requires a negligent breach of duty that is owed to an individual or organization. This duty is based on a clear standard of conduct that is held and enforced for the profession. Unfortunately, most courts apparently feel that the software industry has no generally accepted standards comparable to those in the engineering or the medical field. The case of hospital computer systems versus Staten Island Hospital demonstrated this with a ruling that stated, quote, when no such higher code of ethics binds a person, such a trust is unwarranted. Hence, no duties independent of those created by contract are imposed upon them. And this was the name of the paper was Defective Software and the Issues of Malpractice, if you're curious about looking it up. However, this may be changing, and I don't know the degree to which this applies to an international audience. By the way, that's something I haven't had a chance to research yet. There's a paper by Toby from 2018, and again, I'm quoting here. Since the dawn of the computer age, courts in the United States have almost universally rejected the theory of software malpractice, declining to hold software engineers to the same professional standards as doctors, lawyers, and engineers. What is changing, however, is the speed at which software based on artificial intelligence technologies is replacing the very professionals already subject to professional liability. Society has already decided, in some cases millennia ago, that those tasks warrant special accountability. New to the analysis is which human is closest in line to the adverse event. As AI expands, the pressure for courts to go one level up the causal chain in search of human agency and professional accountability will mount. So the short version of this story is that sooner or later, software developers may be held to standards of practice in the not too distant future because we're writing the software that's supplementing or replacing the functionality of other professionals held to other professional standards. So this is something for us to keep an eye out for in the future. Okay, so I've got a few minutes left, so let's do a quick exercise. One of the situations that I've read about in the workplace Stack Exchange was a software developer who was asked by his boss to create a new feature within the software that would allow them to remotely control their users' phones' cameras without telling them that the phone camera was on. Didn't supply details as to who the company was for obvious reasons. I have no idea who it was. Apparently it was a relatively mid-sized company. So let's talk about how we might apply some of the things that we talked about here. Anybody got any thoughts about, are any of you software developers, and what would you do under these circumstances? What's it like for you? Anyone? Kind of hard to see. Yeah. Awesome. Genius. I love it. Nobody's given me that answer yet. Good one. What else? Anyone? Anybody work in a team-based environment where the team is treated as a unit of accountability within the company? Anyone? Somebody's got to be doing that. I've been doing that. Okay, what about some of the other things that we've talked about, like living frugally? Do any of you have strategies that you want to share for that kind of thing? Don't have children, yes. I second the motion. What else? How do you deal with moral crises at work? Do you push back on scope? Do you push back on timing? Can you say to your employer, hey, I know that this morally questionable feature is your biggest priority right now, but this one, I've been getting a lot of calls from my friends about this one. How about if we push this up the list? Anybody try anything along those lines? Excellent. Great idea. So for those of you in the back who may not be able to hear, who's suggesting ask more questions about why the feature is being developed in the first place. What is it that we need this for? Why are we doing this thing that I'm uncomfortable with? Great idea. What else? Anyone? Excellent. Yeah, I love it. Bring the legal department in. These are great suggestions. I'm going to add these to the slides. Thank you. Bring the legal department in. Ask them to come and listen in and make sure that we're within the scope of the law. We don't want to take any unnecessary legal risks. That's an excellent idea. What if you don't have a legal department? Is there an alternative to that kind of thing? Anybody have any experience in that kind of situation if you're at a smaller employer that doesn't have a legal shop? Ooh, that would be neat. I'd love to Google that and see what pops up. An ethics hotline would be a fabulous idea. I have to look that one up. Okay, I'm just about out of time. Thank you all again for coming out today. I really appreciate your time and attention. Thanks.
Nope. Thank you, Bill. I do want to remind you that at lunch, which we're not close to yet, but you should come back here and get your T-shirt if you haven't got a T-shirt. Right. What else? Oh, open spaces. You wanted to say something about
Please vote for open spaces. So in Guidebook, you hit your hamburger, find open spaces, vote, find the things you like, put a check mark on it, hit in there, and we're going to make sure that we hit all the open spaces things now.
And we have a question out here.
Yeah.
Yesterday they didn't make you log in, but today they're making you log in.
Is everybody experiencing that?
Okay, so you could log in as a guest yesterday? Into the guidebook. Yeah.
I haven't experienced that, but I'll take it to our guidebook person locally and see what we can have, and we'll try and have an answer for you. Thank you. I will take it to our local guidebook person who knows what they're doing, and we will try and get an answer for you. Those are my big ones. Okay.
Oh, yeah, so more sponsored pictures, right? Okay, Warner.
Big hand for the organizing team. These people made the party for you. Now we're going to celebrate the people who buy us food and help us fund this event. First, I'm going to be introducing Ray, who's going to tell us about Appdynamics. Please welcome Ray.
How's everyone doing today? Oh, good to hear, good to hear. So Appdynamics is an APM tool solution for monitoring your application performance, specifically in a DevOps environment. We are the fastest and largest growing APM solution on the market today. And the reason for that is we are the best solution out there today. So if you need help in getting your business metrics, application metrics, and infrastructure metrics on one pane of glass so you can understand the impact you're having on the business, we'd love to talk to you. Please stop by and talk to us at our booth. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Ray. Appreciate your support. Now I'm going to be welcoming Sean with VMware.
Hey, good morning. My name's Sean Odell. I'm a developer advocate at VMware. No, I'm not here to tell you to move all your applications to on-premises. Clap, 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 okay. Come on, tough crowd. No, really. So yeah, VMware, obviously, I think most of you know us as a hypervisor company. But to be very fair, if you haven't checked the news, you might want to go look and see that we're the #2 contributor to Kubernetes and many other things. But the reality is we're here at Devopsdays, and we've been doing this about 1.5 years now. My team has specifically, because we are a software company as well. We write in many languages. We write in many different form factors, whether it's on premises or in the native public clouds, as we like to call them, the big hyperscalers. So as you have some time today, come talk to us. We're here to talk about DevOps, what you're doing in the public cloud, what you're doing in the cloud native space, and more importantly, we're not here to talk about on-premises. So with that in mind, come check us out. My peer's got a session later on today about cheesecake. Go check that out as well. But really appreciate you being here, and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks so much, Sean. I didn't mention my name's Warner Moore. The organizing team is looking for sponsorships. Go figure. So if you like this event and want to see it happen again, if your company sponsor events or you know somebody who is interested in getting access to candidates, decision makers, people who buy technology like yourselves, you should have them talk to somebody in a blue shirt or one that says staff. Some of us are not in blue shirts. Now I'm going to welcome back Renee, who is going to introduce our next speaker with JD here. Big hand.
Hi, I'm JD, and this is Renee, and we're going to introduce Derek Weeks. Derek works at Sonatype, and also all day DevOps is kind of what he does all day long.
Yes.
So if you want to learn a lot about DevOps, Derek is a great resource for you, and today he's going to present data-driven look at high-velocity software practices.
All right, thank you, Derek.
And we never make decisions without data, so always have your data. Thank you, Derek.
That works? Yep. That works. Hey, Ohio. Columbus, it's really good to be here. I need to do this. OH. See, I'm not from here, but I think that's just a cool thing to do. So I'm Derek Weeks. I work at Sonatype. I'm also co-founder of All Day DevOps, and I have a treat for you before lunch today. So I'm glad that you're all here to chat about some research I've been doing for the last 6 years. So any organization's journey, any of your organization's journeys to excellence begins when you cease to sacrifice quality for velocity, for speed. Right? But record scratch. Nicole Forsgren and David earlier this morning just told us like velocity is extremely important. Right? Every year in the State of DevOps report, we're told that peak performers out there are deploying 200 times faster. Their change failure rates are 7 times lower. Their mean time to respond to incidents is 2,600 times faster. They are 1.7 times more likely to extensively use open source in their environment. And in fact, they're 1.5 times more likely to want to expand their use of open source through their environments. So speed is a good thing. And speed and open source have helped us become extremely efficient within our organizations. It's helped us develop software faster and release software faster. And the use of open source within software development practices is what led to an intersection of the research I've been doing for the last few years with Gene Kim and Dr. Stephen McGill and a host of other security and data researchers, data scientists, throughout the past year. So we spent 10 months collecting data, analyzing data about how software development teams are working. And part of what we wanted to understand within this research comes from the Phoenix Project and the first way of DevOps within the Phoenix Project. That is, you have to understand the performance of the end-to-end system, and also as part of the first way of DevOps, never pass a known defect downstream. In order to better understand the use of open source in software development, what we wanted to do through our research is understand how software supply chains were utilized and different parts of those software supply chains were utilized. All of you in every single one of your organizations, you have a software supply chain that is fully in effect. You have suppliers, there are warehouses, there are manufacturing lines or development lines, and there are finished goods. Right? You rely on open source projects for parts that you put into software. You get those parts from internet-based warehouses like Maven Central, NPM, the PyPy repo, the NuGet gallery, and you consume those into your software development practices to produce your finished goods at the end of the day. For the research that we undertook this past year, we looked at 36,000 open source projects intensively to understand how they performed. We looked at over 30 million open source releases over the last 10 years to better understand those components and attributes associated with them. We looked at 12,000 software development organizations and surveyed over 6,000 developers on how they use open source in development. And we also examined over 68,000 applications built with open source components. And I'm going to share some of what we found out through that journey today with you. To get a sense of how much open source is being used out there, I'm going to share some stats with you. In Maven Central, this is where anyone that is a Java developer is going to get their Java open source components. There are 10 million Java developers on the planet. Last year, they requested 146 billion downloads from Maven Central. If you are a JavaScript developer, you are helping the 6.5 million JavaScript developers worldwide download 11 billion JavaScript packages every week. The average JavaScript developer is downloading 66,000 packages a year. So what does this mean? Well, for one thing, it means we're being really efficient. right? Because why would you spend an hour, a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of weeks writing something from scratch when it's literally available from the internet to download in a second for free, right? We all know this, and that's why we download these components. And these components allow us to develop our applications a lot faster. They improve the quality of the applications that we develop, and they make up about 85 to, in some places, 98% of the applications that are being built, the other parts being the custom code that you write to glue all of these components together. So when I looked at 12,000 software development organizations just in the perspective of Java components that they were consuming, last year the average organization consumed 313,000 Java open source components. They did this by relying on over 2,700 open source projects within the Java community, and within those over 8,000 individual component releases across that population. You are effectively relying, if you think about this in a supply chain context, you have over 2,700 external suppliers of software that you are relying upon to build 85% of that application that you're now producing. So, what we understood, and we have understood for years within the Dora reports and the State of DevOps reports, is that faster is better in the enterprise. The enterprises that are, the elite DevOps performers have higher market share, they're more profitable, they have happier employees, right? But we wanted to figure out, is faster better within the open source community, within the suppliers that we're all relying upon to help build our software faster. So who is a really good supplier, and how do we quantify that choice for our organization for the external suppliers that we're relying upon? So in order to do this, comparing enterprises with open source projects, there are similarities, but there are also differences within those. So of course you have multiple deploys a day, a week, a month, as we learned earlier in David's presentation, but you have version releases within open source. You have consistent development teams, and you're fairly well-resourced, or at least predictably resourced in the enterprise. On the open source side, it's not as predictable. Development teams are a lot more fluid within the open source community, depending on any of you that are contributing, how much time you have, how much you want to contribute to these programs and projects overall. But there are some similar metrics that we can look at. What is the deployment frequency within enterprises? How do we relate that to open source projects and the release frequency? The organizational performance, is this a good organization, a profitable organization, a money-making organization? In open source, it really kind of falls down to popularity. How popular is this project? And the more popular it is, supposedly the more successful that project is over time. We also have mean time to respond or mean time to remediate incidents that come up. And within open source projects, we have the time to remediate vulnerabilities or time to update your projects in general. So in the research, we wanted to first look at how open source projects performed from a release frequency and popularity perspective. In order to do this, we needed a study set to analyze, or a data set to analyze. So again, we looked at the Java open source components, mainly because I work at Sonatype. Sonatype is part of its non-commercial side of its business. We run Maven Central, so we have access to all the data to do the research on the suppliers and the components that are there, so we were able to deep dive into this. But we looked at overall 260,000 projects, but we needed some similarities and commonalities among this data set. So we wanted to look at projects that had had multiple releases over a 5-year period. Projects that followed a standard versioning process, projects that had multiple dependencies that they relied upon and updated those over time. And we came down to a group of 36,000 open source projects that met these criteria that we could then evaluate. We also looked at the open source projects as your suppliers based on a number of different attributes, from the popularity, which was their average download count, the size of the development teams, which we could often get from GitHub and other sources, development speed, release of continuous integration, release speeds, update times, etc., to figure out a lot of different performance attributes or behavioral attributes of these projects that we're all relying upon. So the first hypothesis that we entered the research with was projects that release more frequently have better outcomes. And this was actually true. We validated this within the research. These groups were 5 times more popular, so more people were downloading them if they were releasing more frequently. They had larger sets of developers, which is also good. The more developers, the better resource, the more consistently they could update frequently. And they also had a greater rate of foundational support within their practices. So the next and more complicated part of doing this analysis was figuring out the mean time to update and the mean time to remediate for these projects when they had problems or when there were issues, or just how frequently they were releasing in general. This is important because, again, if we look at this from a supply chain context, from a manufacturing context, there are similarities that we can pull from decades ago, where W. Edwards Deming was advising auto manufacturers like Toyota and Mitsubishi, Ford, and others to identify and fix defects early within the manufacturing process because it was a lot cheaper to do it there, but also to rely on a set of suppliers that was not just any suppliers out in the market, but the fewest and best suppliers. And to use not only to use the fewest and best suppliers, but to use the absolute best parts available from those suppliers. So the rules, if you look at those kind of rules in terms of quality, performance of your suppliers, what we were able to do is look at 3 particular metrics from the open source community in these projects. And that was time to remediate when there was a vulnerability, time to update in general, so how frequently are they releasing, and then stale dependencies. Are they leaving any dependency updates behind as they go through? So to understand the kind of analysis that we had to go through, I'm going to walk through a very simple model with you that's a core component and 2 dependencies. Now, some projects, of course, have a lot more dependencies, but just to give you a sense of what we walked through. So in this case, we have component C 2.2, and it has 2 dependencies, B 2.2 and A 2.2. And what we wanted to figure out is what happens and what is the timing of what happens between 2.2 and 2.3 releasing for C. Well, as it turns out, on occasion, a component or a dependency has a vulnerability discovered in it. That vulnerability is discovered in 2.2, B 2.2, but it has to rely on the open source project to update that component, remove the vulnerability or fix the vulnerability, and release a new version. During that time that B is vulnerable, because C also relies on it, C is vulnerable. So we wanted to calculate the vulnerable time for C. And we also looked at if B updated, then the time for C 2.3 to incorporate B 2.3 was the remediation time, as well as the update time for these components. We also needed to look at other dependencies that were in place. So A 2.4 being incorporated to C 2.3 is the update time for A. But you also see A 2.3 was never incorporated into the project. So we wanted to see what was the update time, what was the remediation time, and were there any stale dependencies being left, and if so, how often were those stale dependencies left or not incorporated in? So here's what we found when looking at open source projects that had known security vulnerabilities. So a vulnerability, this is not unknown, so these are known security vulnerabilities announced, they have CVEs, did the project update those dependencies or the core component with the vulnerability? So the median time to update for any of these 36,000 projects was 180 days. The mean time to update was almost a year. So if a vulnerability was discovered, it takes on average a year to update it, which means if there's a vulnerability in a project that you're using or with a supplier that you're using, on average, that supplier is taking a year to create the fix, to deliver the fix, and then it takes longer for you to take that fix and put it into your environment. And then there's the 95th percentile. Well, at least these organizations or projects did update their components for vulnerabilities, but they took 3.5 years to do it. There are other projects that have never remediated and therefore are not on the chart. But there were some strong performers here, right? So what we want to figure out is, and as we've said before, you don't want to just rely on any supplier or any open source project. You want to rely on the best. So when a project had a known vulnerability, could they update quickly? So the top 20% of these organizations were updating, anywhere between 50 or within 100 days. They are releasing a new version that has the vulnerability fix within it. But not all open source projects have a known vulnerability ever within them. Some just go without vulnerability. So we wanted to figure out, how does the mean time to remediate or median time to remediate compare to the median time to update? And so this is, if these organizations are updating quickly, right, then projects that are remediating quickly, what we found out was those projects or projects in general update frequently. And the projects that update frequently are also staying more secure as a consequence of updating frequently. So the blue line remains the same. That is the mean time to remediate security vulnerabilities. If we look at whether they have security vulnerabilities or not, are they updating their dependencies over time? And what we see is there's a high correlation between those that are updating frequently and those that are maintaining higher levels of security. Now, this is obvious and logical to anyone that understands known vulnerabilities. If a component just came out in the market, there's been fewer eyeballs on it, and therefore less time to discover known vulnerabilities in it. So if you're using more current versions, you're likely to stay safer. But we did see this high correlation. So we wanted to figure out in this group as well, were there any other attributes of suppliers other than update frequency that any of us could rely on to make better supplier choices in time? But this, before I get to that, the hypothesis 2 that we entered with was projects that update their dependencies more frequently would stay more secure. So the data did validate that. We did see that that was true, obviously from the charts that we just showed. Now, the hypothesis 3, and I'm not going to go through all the hypotheses from the study here, just a couple to highlight the findings that we had, but we wanted to see if projects with fewer dependencies would actually stay more up to date. So if you're a project and you only have 2 dependencies, it's going to be a lot easier in that model that I showed you previously with components A, B, and C to update than if you had 17 or 20 or 40 dependencies on the open source project, right? So that's totally logical. 2 is easier to update than 17. And it's not true based upon the data. So projects with fewer dependencies actually had a worse time to update. Projects with more dependencies had better times to update. And what we saw here was that larger development teams had faster times to update, and they released more frequently. And we're seeing here on the chart the size of the development team from top to bottom. So the teams are getting bigger as you go up the chart. As you go from left to right, the further right you are, the more dependencies you have. So as teams grew in size, they actually had more dependencies that they were relying upon, and the larger teams were actually updating their dependencies more. So there's a high correlation between the size of the development team in the number of dependencies they had. We don't know the causation of if more developers are bringing more dependencies to the open source project, or if more dependencies requires more developers. We didn't look at that within the study, but what we certainly found was that 2 pizza teams are a heck of a lot more productive than 1 pizza team, because you can feed about 4 to 6 developers with 2 pizzas, and they have more dependencies, they're updating faster, and releasing more frequently as projects. So this is my favorite hypothesis from the study. So projects that are more popular are more able to stay up to date within their practices. So the reason that this is important was we all rely on popularity for our choices of open source components. And we all read back in 1999, The Cathedral and the Bazaar, when Eric S. Raymond said, with more eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. Right? So in open source in 99, back when he wrote this, open source was this evil monster that was competing against proprietary software, and it was, you shouldn't use open source because it's dangerous and it's not secure. And in this book, Eric S. Raymond introduced Linus's law: with more eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, and therefore more people working on this and more eyeballs will make these components and open source more secure. But we found out that wasn't necessarily true, that not all projects that are popular are actually good at staying up to date or good at staying more secure. So as part of the study, when we were looking at this, we started to understand different clusters of behavior within the study. So part of this ends up that we have exemplar groups, both small and large. They were the ones with, the small groups had 1.5 to 2 developers. The large groups had between 8 and 9 developers on average. They were staying up to date frequently. They were staying more secure as a consequence of staying more up to date. The laggards had poor mean times to update, so they were the folks at 3.5 years updating things, lots of stale dependency counts. The features first folks were releasing new updates frequently, but they weren't fixing security vulnerabilities as a result. So they had poor times to update vulnerabilities. And then the cautious they updated at an okay rate, but they were never really good at staying on the latest version of their dependencies overall. So here's this is one of my favorite charts from the report. So the easiest way to read this is the large exemplars and the small exemplars are the green and blue dots within this chart. And what we read here is the release frequency from left to right. So the further left you are in this chart, the faster you are at releasing. How many days does it take you to get a release? On the y-axis here, the higher you are, the more popular you are as an open source project. And so we found this cluster of behavior of the exemplars were actually releasing more frequently, and whether they were a small team or a large team, and they were more popular as a result of releasing more frequently, staying up to date, delivering more features. So if you wanted to pick suppliers based upon some kind of attributes, yes, you want popularity, but you want these organizations releasing frequently, you want them staffed well from a development team perspective. And what you don't want to rely upon is this group, because this group is popular, but they're not very good at updating. They're not very good at releasing frequently. So if we go over here, these organizations are at 100 days. These organizations are at a year to give any kind of update. So what we were seeing was that more popular organizations, or the most popular projects, weren't necessarily the best projects, and that relying on popularity alone as an attribute for choosing your projects is not the only attribute that you should rely upon. So as we were going through this research, the other question that we had all along is, I know how our suppliers are behaving and how frequently they're updating their dependencies and how frequently they have releases. And we know from the State of DevOps reports that higher performance teams have higher update frequencies or release frequencies. But we went out and we surveyed 658 developers back in May, and we asked them, what are your practices of updating dependencies? Do you have a program in place? Have you applied any automation to this? Is there a practice for removing troublesome dependencies within your environments? And quite honestly, I think we were all surprised by the data that came back. So 652 people answered the survey. They answered every question in the survey. And I think this is kind of aspirational in terms of answers. Yes, we're applying some process and some automation and some policy into what we're doing. But I kind of expected it to come back 7 or 8% of people were actually updating dependencies on a regular basis or had a practice in place to do so. But it was surprising nonetheless to see the survey data come back to say, yes, we have practices in place. And when we looked at, this is even more important, when we looked at the data to understand the behaviors of the exemplars in these groups, so those that had a process in place to update the dependencies or scheduled updates, had a process in place, used some automation, they were 12 times more likely to use automation, 11 times more likely to have a process, 10 times more likely to schedule dependencies. But as a result, the exemplars were 3.2 times less likely to consider updating dependencies as painful, and 2.6 times less likely to consider updating dependencies as painful when there was a vulnerability. And what that told us was when you're climbing this mountain every day, it's easier. If you do this as a standard part of your practices, and you're doing this once every couple of months, really it's easy. If you're updating your dependencies once a year, once every other year, updating to the latest versions, it's a trudge, right? If you climb a mountain once every other year, it's going to be hard. If you climb a mountain every day, it becomes easier, and your employees are happier. So similar to what we see in the State of DevOps report, more frequent deployments, happier employees, higher job satisfaction, same way for dependency management. Now, we also, as I mentioned, looked at 68,000 applications overall to understand what components they were using. Now, what you see here is that half of the components being used were developed in the last 3 years. And this is important because when you look at the vulnerability rates in those components, the ones that were developed in 2017 or newer have a 65% lower vulnerability rate than older components. Half the components that you're using, 15% of those have known vulnerabilities. If you just use the newer, later versions of the latest versions of components, you could drop your vulnerability defect density by 65% through this practice. Now, Jez Humble and Dave Farley, when they wrote Continuous Delivery, they didn't say go fast, and that's the only purpose of that book. In chapter 1, they said you have to build quality in, right? And as part of building quality in, how do you do that? When we surveyed 5,500 developers back in January, the elite DevOps teams, the blue here, were telling us tooling is informing them of security updates or security vulnerabilities within the code that they have. Not security tools, these are developers saying developer tools are helping me become more aware of this. When we ask about things like open source policies, do you have one in place or not? Those that didn't have a policy in place, or those that were non-DevOps practices, 25% followed their policy. When automation was present in the elite DevOps practices, they were 62% of the time had a process and followed it. When automation is there and present for developers, it's harder to ignore the policies and governance that happen around open source choices. And as a result, in managed software supply chains, we can see a 55% reduction in the visibility or presence of known security vulnerabilities within these open source components. So by getting this information, the core purpose of this information throughout the study was to understand if we're relying on so many of these suppliers, how do we make better choices? And how do we make better choices at the speed of development by applying these attributes? So there's no solutions on the market that actually apply any of this data that we found in the research this past year, but it allows us, now that we have data, to actually start thinking about how can we build this into our development and DevOps practices to make better choices on the 2,400 suppliers that we're relying upon, right? So imagine if we could have an automated rating system for open source projects where you understood who's a 2-star supplier within the ecosystem. Maybe even if they're super popular, they have other attributes that don't make them as highly rated as the 5-star projects within the communities. As mentioned in an earlier presentation about, imagine that machines are making software. Imagine machines are coding, right? Machines are assembling application. If 85% of what you're building or 95% of what you're building is coming from pre-assembled parts, machines can learn pretty easily what are the best parts to use and how do I put these together from the best suppliers and keep them up to date. Now, none of you as developers are out of a job because of this kind of data. Your kids, your choice. So our journey together as an organization, as a community, begins when we cease to sacrifice quality for speed. Hopefully this information you found helpful, insightful. Hopefully it will spark a discussion in your own organization. For any of you that want a copy of the slides, the surveys, the state of the software supply chain report that Gene, myself, Dr. Stephen McGill published back in July. Very simple. My out-of-office email is on for today. If you email me at weeks@sonatype.com, you don't need to put a subject line or anything. It just sends my auto-reply email. It has the links on SlideShare where the documents and the slides are located. You don't have to register to download them. Because this is being recorded, if you are watching this after this conference and you email me, my out-of-office message is not on. Please say, I watched your Devopsdays Columbus presentation. I'd like the slides, and not just email me some blank thing with no subject line from who knows where, which I do get on occasion, and then I have to guess who is this person and what did they want and which conference presentation was I at. So that is all I have, and we're going to wrap up, but thank you very much. We doing lunch?
Yep. Oh, no, we're not
No,
having lunch
no,
yet.
no.
What are you doing? You gotta keep people over there?
Everybody stay put.
Stay in the room.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you so much. It's always good to have informed decisions when you're going to install software anywhere. We did take your guidebook feedback. Thank you very much. Who brought that to our attention, and we flipped the toggle that says log in or don't log in. So now you can go through guidebook. Please go through guidebook and vote on open spaces. You hit the hamburger, you hit open spaces, day voting 2. It seems like there's 3 choices. Click as many as you really like. It's an artifact of the software that we're using this year. Click a bunch, hit submit. And we want to close the voting, I think, by lunchish, I believe is what John asked for. So by lunchish, because he needs time to put things together and get the schedule published. So before the end of lunch, please vote.
Yeah. We're going to close it at the end of Ignites.
End of Ignites. There you go.
Or I'm sorry, at the beginning of Ignites, at the end of lunch. Yeah.
Let's have another hand for Derek. So we're doing raffles next, is that it?
Yeah.
All right, so does everyone know what day it is today?
Oh, you want a prize? No, I'm kidding.
It's International Talk Like a Pirate Day today. So let's try and do the raffles with a little bit of pirate flavor.
Yep.
So like when are you guys announcing winners? Yeah. R.R. Matey, Shiver Me Timbers. Otherwise I'm going to do a Q&A this afternoon like that.
Oh, you haven't? Okay, we'll take care of that. Yeah. Yeah, come on up. We got a lot of confusion going on. Who else needs to do their sponsor pitch? Are you the only one? Warner.
They're all done.
They're done? Confluence says they still need a minute.
They told me 11:30.
just told me at 11:30.
All right,
so
here.
Whatever.
Let's do the raffle, and then go ahead and do your 1 minute as well. Yeah.
Well, then I'm going to save the raffle. Hi, Derek Kane from Confluent. I live in Columbus. I'm a big fan of DevOps and Divot. Used to do DevOps before it was called DevOps. So thank you all for coming. This is our first year at DevOps Columbus. I think it's pretty well organized, so hats off to the organizers. I work for a company called Confluent, and just to show of hands, does anybody know what Apache Kafka is? Just show of hands. Anybody know what Apache Kafka is? That's great. So Apache Kafka is a real-time data integration platform. So we move data from place to place. If you're used to using ETL systems or you're used to message buses, Confluent runs, or Apache Kafka runs, the best of those features, which is moving data from one system to another in real time. We can do streaming analytics. We have a case SQL engine, so you can write select statements on the data as it's flowing in real time. So that's what we do. We've been in business for about 5 years. Our founders created Kafka when they worked at LinkedIn, and they open sourced it to the Apache Foundation. I joined the company because I love the product itself. So I'm here in Columbus. We appreciate us giving us the time and allow us to co-sponsor the event. I also run the Columbus Mid-Ohio Data User Group, MODUG. If anybody's heard of MODUG, we're on Meetup. So I run that user group. So check it out if you're interested in data technologies. And thanks for your time today.
Thank you. And you want to do your raffle real quick?
Yes, I will do our raffle. So for those of you that met us at the table, we have a Sonos, the Confluent table, we have a Sonos Bluetooth speaker. We've picked out a card here, so I'm going to draw the card here. Maybe one of you can read it for me.
Yes.
That's.
Yeah, you didn't do very well with the talk like a pirate thing.
Oh, I didn't?
No.
No, that's for the raffle.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
for the
just for the
raffle?
raffle. I thought he had to do his pitch like a pirate. Come on.
I didn't
You're no
hear about
fun.
the pirate thing.
All right. Arg. I see here this matey called Madhukar?
Madhukar Ashok from KeyBank.
From KeyBank.
It's the winner. Congratulations.
Yes,
Is he
there
in
we
the room?
go.
Yeah, there he is.
Arg. Shiver me timbers.
Hello. We're here from Dynatrace. We have a Echo show, and our winner is John Knapp from AEP.
Arg. Is it a present to win, or are you going to mail it to him?
Another one if they're not here.
Oh, so what's the name again?
John Knapp.
John. He's out in the lobby. Okay. Sure, I work with him.
Liar. I don't believe that guy. Sorry. VMware, we have an iPad mini. Ganesh Kumar Kumaraswamy. Ganesh?
I work with him.
Kumar. He's with OCLC. No?
No? Vinesh?
That always happens that way. Okay, here we go. Elamaran Shenmugam from KeyBank.
There we go.
Awesome.
Arg. Come on, a little more args.
No pirates here.
Alrighty, with Liatrio, and we have an Arctic cooler, and we have Adam Howard. Howard. There we go.
There he is. Scurvy dog.
All right. Yep. All right. Hey, I'm Paul Feeney from Red Hat, and we have a bag of Red Hat swag for
Pirate.
Mita Sorkel.
Arg. There you go. Yep. There? Yes. All right. Big round of applause.
All right. And then we also have an Amazon gift card for Cesar Misones. Does anyone work with Cesar? You again? This guy works with everybody.
So is that really you? Oh. Yeah. Are they actually in the building still? Okay. Can we just scream at everyone in the hallway that if they want to win something, they need to be butts in seats? I think this is the last time we're going to have a coworker pick something up. Who was that? Ganesh? Who drew Ganesh? Sorry. Oh, you need to go talk to VMware and resolve that with them. Sorry. So like seriously, like text your friends and say get in here because you need to be in here to win. All right.
Hey guys, Scott Phillips. Appreciate everyone stopping by Appdynamics to see us about application monitoring. We have a Sonos One speaker, and the winner is Dan Reese. Shiver me timbers.
Dan Reese.
Dan in the house today.
Going once.
Going
No,
twice.
he's not here. All right,
He
we
is
have
not here.
confirmation.
Okay, alternate choice, Andy Chun. Andy.
Yes, all right.
Welcome. Congratulations. Thank you.
Sorry, I was like, I got a meeting.
Hey guys, Terry Flowers. I'm from Instana. We're giving a $200 Amazon gift card, so this person doesn't have to be here. We have their email, so we're going to send it. And it's Doug First from McGraw Hill.
Oh, congratulations, Doug. You're welcome.
Hi, this is Christy with GitLab. We have a Raspberry Pi, and the winner was Ravi Darna from Cognizant. Are you in here? Woo!
Woohoo! What would a pirate say to celebrate?
It was last row. What do we say about that?
Arr. Come on.
We're in. Hey, I'm Andrew with Sysdig. We're giving away a JBL Charge 4 and Brent Johnson.
Brent.
Oh, all right.
Oh, the
Big
guy
day.
from the Phoenix Project, right?
Sure.
Was that Brent? You're like, what?
Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Downs from Tasktop. The winner of the drone is Steven Chenchak. Steven?
There we go. Arr. Mandy will do it.
Do what?
Talk like a pirate.
I had an illegal copy of Photoshop as an undergrad. Here all day. Chef is giving it away an espresso. Our first pick is June Bick. Oh, we got one.
All right. Next. Come on up. Make a line. You keep this line moving.
We're from New Relic, and we are giving away a starter kit to Rush Aria 51. And the winner is Yogita Pujari. Pujari. Anybody know?
Is that her?
Oh, there she is. Hey!
Hey, all right. And is that it?
I think so.
There's any other back there hiding? No? All right, so open spaces. So we have a couple minutes before lunch. We made the mistake yesterday and sent you too early. There are a few lunch details that I want to cover. But first, let's talk about open spaces. So who participated in open spaces yesterday? All right, good. So new program this year, so we're trying to figure out what works and what didn't work. Obviously, there was a little bit of confusion yesterday in opening the open spaces. That's probably a little bit of my fault. Yeah, but it's
Blameless. Let's stay blameless, right? We'll use our
We'll
own
cover it in our
words.
retro next
Right.
week. That's right. So who wants to? Why don't you run down there and somebody wants to talk about what session they were in yesterday and what they learned and why they liked the open spaces.
Participate.
Come on.
It's fun. It's more fun when you play along.
I've made the call and I'm going to look really stupid if nobody raises their hand.
All right.
And
do you have a good experience in open spaces they want to talk about, or maybe?
Where's Kyle at? Kyle was in the open spaces.
No. All right.
No? No one? Really? There we go. There's a hand.
Oh, it's a friendly face.
He's going to be like, "Oh, I wasn't in the open spaces, but my coworker was."
He took a class. Oh, stand and deliver. Oh. Thank you.
Yeah. So yesterday during Open Spaces, I went to the secret management one, which I think we all had really great communication. A lot of people participated. got new ideas from other people, challenges. We really talked through some situations. So I think that most people in the room learned some things, right? So I just thought it was a really good session and kind of offered ideas and concepts that we may haven't thought of before. So.
Yep, exactly. And that's the idea, is that you can learn from your peers who might have solved this problem. Or if everybody in the room doesn't know how to solve the problem, then maybe you can come up with creative solutions and ideas. Who else wants to just share real quickly what they got out of their open space session yesterday? I only need like maybe one or two more, and then we can go to lunch. We're going to stand here in awkward silence till somebody raises their hand. Huh? They're ready? We got one right here. All right, great.
Perfect, thank you. Hand us down.
Yeah, man, I think once we get past the issues with just everyone using guidebook and that stuff, no big deal. Conversations were great. It's encouraging, seeing folks from the Columbus land area. We always judge ourselves internally at our organizations. Oh, man, we're sucking at this. We're terrible. It's great to talk to other folks and figure out, maybe you're not so bad off. You're maybe a little ahead, or at least hearing the same stories.
Yep.
So that alone is always worth it, whether it's Devopsdays or any other conferences that we always go to. So it's good just to internally benchmark. So
yeah,
appreciate the conversations, especially the ability to throw topics in. So,
yep. And the way I like to think of open spaces, especially now that we have like afternoon sessions and things like that, is you can look at it as a structured hallway track, right? So for those of you who don't go to a lot of conferences and aren't familiar with what the hallway track is, the hallway track is, so this is the main track, and then we have the workshop track. And then the hallway track is when you're just kind of wandering around and you just start talking to somebody and have a conversation, or you see somebody you haven't seen for a while and figure out what they've been doing for a while. So the nice thing about open spaces is it gives you a little bit of structure around that hallway track so that you can wander between the rooms, you can look at various topics and have conversations on these different kind of structured topics. So thank you very much for those of you who shared their experience. I encourage you that if you didn't make it to an open space yesterday, that you look at the map and figure out where the rooms are. The Delaware room is not being used anymore. That's moved. So look at the map. The map has day 1 only, day 2 only, and so forth. The other thing I'll say that you might have not went to an open space because you didn't necessarily know. If you tap on, when we have the program ready, if you tap on one of the open space things, you can understand and find out what the topics are as well, so that it'll make navigation and guidance much easier. I think that was one of the things that a lot of people were blocked on yesterday. And then remember, what's the menu called? Hamburger menu. Everyone's hungry. Like somebody's really hungry. Hamburger. Thank you.
Me, Morris.
Hamburger. Hamburger. Go down to open spaces, and then we have open spaces day 2 voting. And if you can't get to this on your phone, we had a few issues where people don't obsessively pay Apple $2,000 every single year and are running on older devices. There's at the registration table, you can get a web-based version of Guidebook as well. And there's a QR code that you can scan to get into that as well. So if you can't download the application, you still have a way to get to the program. True. So regarding lunch, lunch has changed up a little bit. Is that correct?
Right. So what the venue's doing for us today is if you go into the club room, which when you're heading towards the ballroom, the room on the left is the club room. It's got a brick wall. It's a very great room. We have some plated lunches there today. And we also have the general box lunch. If you head towards the ballroom, go right down the hallway, just like we did yesterday, and you can pick up your box lunch and grab a seat. It's the same food in both locations. It's different food, but it's the same food in both locations.
Yeah.
Right?
So the whole idea behind that chart that we showed earlier, that pie chart around trying to be zero waste and trying to get as close to 100% as possible. So they were missing some materials to put everything in the boxes, and so some things are plated in the club room on compostable plates. So.
Right. Nope, they can be surprised.
They can be surprised. All right. And I think there's, go ahead.
Nope.
There's one other thing I wanted to say before we release them.
Yep.
There has been some schedule changes as well, as you might have noticed. Everyone give a big round of applause for Nathan Harvey. He wasn't able to make it, so Dave stepped in and did his talk earlier today. And then we've had to change one of the workshops as well that Nathan was going to deliver. And so we have a container security workshop, if you haven't seen that, that's going to be filling that space back in the alumni lounge. So if you're interested in containers and security, you can look at attending that. The other thing that we fixed is that there should be power in the workshop rooms now as well today. So they're hands-on workshops, and so you should be able to use your laptop. Anything else before we send them away?
Oh, t-shirts.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
t-shirts, the most important thing, right?
Right.
So we're gonna we are currently moving the t-shirts out, and they will be back on the stage. So come by and get a t-shirt. If you like more of a straight cut, we call that. What do we call that? A unisex, huh? Classic. So this would be a straight cut, and then Renee's wearing a fitted cut. So depending upon what your preference is, feel free to choose either one. But please, if there's extras at the end of the day, we can talk about having an extra one, because we don't want to keep them in our garage for the next year. Seriously, I brought in a box of these shirts that's been in somebody's garage for a few weeks or a few years. Sorry. Just take one for now. If there's extras at the end of the day, you're welcome to have an extra one, or we'll do something to maybe give them away or something like that. But with that, please go enjoy lunch. We're back in here at 12:50, and thank you very much.